has a lot of self-injury, what they're trying to do is they're trying to manage that dopamine level through, hitting their head or hitting themselves. So like I said, the immune system is managed through the gut, about 80% of it. So, sorry, I lost my place. So when I'm saying inflammation, I'm talking mostly about that immune system getting fired up. Inflammation can be good in some circumstances. Say you have someone who hit their head, gets a concussion, or they have the stomach bug, which is probably going around a lot right now. That immune system is going to go into the gut lining or the brain, and it's going to send the immune system there to heal it. That's good, we want that. But what we're seeing in autism and a couple other special needs subcategories is that inflammation is in overdrive. That immune system is going and trying to heal the gut and the brain, but what happens is it ends up creating a lot of damage to those tissues as well, because it just keeps going. It's a little overzealous. So some of the most common causes of inflammation is diet. So they have a known allergy. Say someone is celiac. We know, we can test their blood and we can definitely see, okay, they have an actual immune response to gluten. The next one is an intolerance, and that's basically their body is just not breaking down the proteins like they should. So these proteins, they enter the blood system, and the body sees that protein as foreign, and it wants to get rid of it. There's artificial ingredients, which again, the body is seeing it as a toxic ingredient, so the immune system tries to get that out of the body. Or it could be deficiencies in nutrients. Say they're not getting enough B vitamins, or maybe a vitamin D. Anytime that a body is deficient in a nutrient, the way the body functions is going to be compromised. There's other common causes of inflammation, whether it's obesity. Blood sugar tends to be one that I think can kind of be applied to all kids across the board, especially if they're eating a standard American diet. Our standard American diet tends to make these kids have blood sugars that go up and down throughout the day. And what that's telling the brain is it gets this rush of sugar, and then the insulin kicks in and the sugar dips. So the brain can't predict when it's going to have energy and when it's not going to have energy. And it makes it an environment that makes the brain kind of have to battle to heal itself. And then we have other environmental things that can cause inflammation, whether it's pesticides or pollutions, molds, heavy metals, and even high stress, oddly enough. Are these kids being bullied at school, or are they going home and the family situation is stressful between siblings or parents? Even just the emotional weight of that can create an environment that the immune system's not working properly, so the body can't heal properly. So our number one thing that we want to talk about tonight is foods that cause inflammation. And our number one foods are going to be our processed foods. Foods that have been broken down, repackaged, and then given to us and called food. Typically those foods are going to be low in nutrient value and are going to have a lot of preservatives and sugar to keep it shelf stable and also make it palatable. A lot of the times they're going to be highly salted, highly sweet, and full of oils that keep for a long time on the shelf. But when we have those oils in our body, like canola, soybean, vegetable oils, or hydrogenated oils, they create the inflammation in our body and make it really hard for our bodies to reduce pain levels as well. Another big triggers on the food are gluten, which we find in wheat and barley and malt, and then casein, which we find in dairy. And oftentimes our bodies just can't break that down, especially in someone who has autism. So what happens is that body sees that gluten or sees that casein as foreign, and it creates that inflammation. So it's trying to get that casein, get the gluten out of the body. So when someone comes to Special Strong and they ask for nutrition services, our number one goal is to help that family transition from a highly processed diet, a pro-inflammatory diet, to an anti-inflammatory diet. And we do it very slowly. It typically takes a year. They can meet with us one time a month or twice a month. Twice a month tends to be best. We can kind of work more aggressively. But just for your, what works best for your family, start with what's easiest to cut out first. If it's food dyes, then cut that out first. If it's the junky oils, then cut that out first. You want to kind of get going and get the accomplishment first, and then tackle the big offenses first. Okay. All right, so healthy food choice number one is switching to healthy fats. I just remember back in the 90s, it was the big thing to be on a low-fat diet. And thankfully that's starting to come around, and we're seeing that we do need more fat in our diet. However, it matters what kind of fats. I've already mentioned the junky ones that we don't want to have, the canola, the soybean, and the vegetable oil blends. But we want to switch to these healthier fats. So these ones are going to offer antioxidants and also help calm the inflammation in the body. The biggest one and most important one I would recommend on here is the fish oil. Fish oil has a fat in there called DHA, which is the building blocks for the brain. So you can actually give your child a nutrient that helps them rebuild their brain, that helps them to calm that inflammation and to be able to focus better, to be able to understand concepts better. Fat is really helpful in balancing blood sugar. So when you add fat into their diet, instead of their blood sugar going up and down throughout the day, it actually goes a little more level. So the brain can have a more predictable level of energy throughout the day as well. That's going to help them with their focus, with their attention, with their energy throughout the day. You're not going to get major slumps and then highs throughout the day. And then you're also going to add in fat-soluble vitamins. The more fat you consume, the more fat-soluble vitamins you're going to eat as well. So you'll get vitamins A, D, E, and K. All of those are incredibly helpful for bone growth, for hormonal production. You know, we need that a lot as we have these growing kids that have growth hormones, that if we give them the right kind of fats and the right kind of nutrients, they can grow and be helpful. And then before we move on, as far as autism goes, ghee it's from butter, but it's been clarified, so it's had lactose and casein removed. Ghee ends up having a byproduct called butyrate. It's a short-chain fatty acid that actually helps change the environment in the gut. Oftentimes people who have autism have an environment that can cause a lot of behavioral issues, and when you can change it to the butyric acid, the short-chain fatty acid butyric acid, you'll start seeing better behavioral. Okay, so as far as gut flora goes, gut flora is the bacteria in the gut that we want to affect, and what we see in special needs and in autism is that they tend to have a lot of bad bacteria. And that bad bacteria develops from having refined carbohydrates, from having sugar. So as you consume the sugar, the bad bacteria grows, and as the bad bacteria grows, inflammation goes up. And then essentially, it's a vicious cycle that makes the body crave more sugar. So have you guys ever felt like you were just addicted to sugar? Most likely what was going on is that the bad bacteria was contributing to your cravings, because the bacteria wants the sugar, it wants to stay alive, it wants to thrive. So it will send signals to your brain to want to crave more sugar. And I see that in kids all the time, that they're essentially on white flour sugar diets. And we try and discipline them, we try and tell them, don't eat that, it's not good for you. And it helps, but they're essentially fighting a losing battle. So until we can start changing the environment of their gut, then they're really going to struggle, because they'll have food cravings for sugar that are essentially feel uncontrollable. So what are signs of an unhealthy gut? We're going to see a lot of colds and flus and a harder time fighting infections. Maybe they have a lot of ear infections or urinary tract infections. Maybe they have yeast infections. Skin issues like rashes, behavioral problems such as poor attention or inability to focus. Maybe anger and depression and anxiety. Those are big ones that I see with people who have gut problems because of the neurotransmitters not being produced like they should be. And digestive issues. The biggest one that I see in our practice is constipation. We get kids in there who haven't had a healthy bowel movement in years, or are on so many stool softeners or laxatives or prescription medications just to get a bowel movement, maybe once every couple days. And those all have effects on the body that can definitely start changing how the body absorbs nutrients, but it also creates that bad bacteria as well. If they're not having healthy bowel movements every day, we're going to see that vicious cycle kick up even more of more gut issues and more sugar cravings and just a toxic environment in the body. So what we need to do is start switching the foods over that they're consuming. The best thing that you can do is take away the refined sugars, take away the carbs, or the refined carbs, and then give them these kind of carbs. These are called complex carbs, or prebiotic foods. These are the type of foods that when we feed them the bacteria that we want to grow, the good bacteria, it's the type of food they love, that they enjoy. And what we'll do is we'll start creating a healthy gut environment. So some of the favorite ones are like sweet potatoes and bananas. Apples and berries are all great foods to start with. And then if you're seeing constipation issues, you can add like chia seeds, ground flax seeds into smoothies or baked good, or like gluten-free baked goods, just to have a little bit more fiber so that you can help your kids have better and healthy bowel movements. And then another great food choice would be fermented foods. And this would be like raw sauerkraut. You could do coconut yogurt or water kefir or kombucha. My biggest recommendation with these is to start small. You do not want to give your kid an entire tub of coconut yogurt or a bunch of sauerkraut, even though they might like it or want to consume it all. Oftentimes when you give probiotic food that has been fermented and has the bacteria in it, and you give a large amount, you'll see digestive issues such as bloating and gas and maybe diarrhea. So start very small. Start at like a teaspoon a day for 1 or 2 weeks, and then work up from there. So signs of a healthy gut is that we're going to see easy passing bowel movements 1 to 3 times a day, no more tummy complaints, no more heartburn, better moods, better attention, better ability to fight colds and flus and infections. They'll be able to manage their weight better, and their hormones will be better balanced. And by hormones, I'm talking about like thyroid hormones, cortisol hormones. We're seeing kids as young as like 8 and 10 years old who already have thyroid issues, who have high cortisol levels, who are tipping on the scale of diabetes. And that's just not okay. So we definitely want to manage that weight, but we also want to make sure that we're helping their guts as well. So other healthy food choices would be adding in foods that are going to actually heal that gut lining. What we see often is as this immune system tries to get out all these processed foods and these processed oils, it does a great job, but it also leaves a wake of destruction behind. And oftentimes that gut lining is destroyed slightly. So what you want to do is give the gut the building blocks that it needs. The number one building block I could recommend would be glutamine, which is an amino acid, so that's a protein that's been broken down. And that helps build the gut lining up again. You can find glutamine in bone broths, and you can find it in supplement form, like the collagen proteins that you can add to smoothies or soups or even beverages. Just hot or cold, you shake it up and it dissolves completely. And then you can also add in supplements like marshmallow root or sliperium. With these, I just highly recommend you work with a practitioner, especially if you're working with little kids. You want to make sure that you're not giving them too much of a certain herb that might affect them in their little bodies. And you definitely want to make sure you're not giving them an herb that's going to interact with any of their medications that they're taking as well. And then healthy food choice number 3 would be to detox. And I'm not talking about like an intense detox. I'm not talking about a detox that a doctor has to supervise. I'm just wanting to add in foods that's going to help their liver detox naturally. Oftentimes what I see in autism is that they have compromised detox pathways. And what that means is that what someone might detox normally, say they have a heavy metal and it enters their system, their body just naturally detoxes it pretty quickly, and they never see the repercussions of that. What happens in autism is they detox very slowly, and those heavy metals or those pollutions or molds, they can build up and just kind of stay there and just take so long of a time to detox out that it ends up causing damage and compromising organs. So what we want to do is help their livers detox as best as they can. So that means adding in leafy greens, adding in antioxidants and proteins. Oftentimes I see people go on juice fasts and they don't realize that they're still not giving their liver all the nutrients it needs to detox. So you do need protein to detox. You need those hearty meats that take a long time to break down in the slow cooker, like shoulders and rump roasts, because they have tendons and the type of amino acids that the liver needs for a building block to help detox properly. Okay. And then other nutrients that we're looking for would be like magnesium, selenium, zinc. Those are all nutrients that we want to add in that we're going to get from these citrus foods, from the cruciferous vegetables, from the eggs and the oysters. And then how much should they be eating? One of your best measuring tools is going to be your hand as far as portion goes. So at every meal when I am recommending foods, I want someone to have a protein, a non-starchy vegetable, something starchy or fruit, so something that's going to give them the quick energy that they need, and then a fat. So when it comes to a protein, you want to give them 1 to 2 palm sizes. So it's going to be the same circumference and then the same thickness. So for your kids who are very athletic, you probably want to do 2 portions of the protein, and then same with all the other suggestions. If they are very athletic, you're basically going to want to double their food. And then with the non-starchy vegetable, it would just be a handful cooked. If it's leafy grains, you do 2 handfuls. For starches, you want to do a cupped hand, and then for fat, it would be about the same portion as your thumb. And then fruit would be 1 to 3 pieces of the grain. Okay, so next I'd like to talk about how fitness can improve someone who has autism. So oftentimes, someone who has autism, they're not in a fitness program that is specifically helpful for them. They might be in a sports program, which is awesome. That's definitely good. We want them to be moving, and we want them to be, getting that energy out. But what we see is that it's not specific for what their body needs, for what their brain needs also, because exercise does improve the brain. And what we have at Special Strong is someone called Tricia Snyder. She's a brain integration expert. So she's actually researched and put together exercise programs that help people who have special needs. It helps them integrate their brain through their whole body. And what that does is it helps them emotionally, helps them physically, and it helps them cognitively as well. And what our programs do is it helps improve coordination. It helps them to develop movement planning. So something as simple as walking from here to the door might be very easy for someone in the general population, but someone with special needs, it might be maybe abstract or difficult to have to actually open the door and hold it also. So we help them that way as well. We help them through acts of daily living. We choose very specific exercises that help them emotionally as well. And then we always start with an assessment. We assess them physically, cognitively, and their motivation to stay on task. And then we check in with them every couple months to assess them and make sure that we're seeing improvement as well. And one of the best things we do is we have fun with it. We make sure that when they show up, they are having fun with the trainer. We do boot camps and encourage them, do very behavior-specific praise so that they know exactly what they're doing is what they should be doing. And what we end up seeing is that we see kids who love fitness. They love to move. We end up seeing that they have more confidence in life, that they have better confidence in their relationships with other people, they have better confidence in their decision making and their choices and their independence. They feel more confident in doing that. And then we also get all the benefits of exercise. So we see that it regulates their blood sugar and their hormones. It helps create an appetite so that when it's mealtime, they're ready to eat. It helps burn fat and tone muscles. And most importantly, it helps them sleep at night. And I'm sure for any parent, that's super important that their kids sleep at night. But that, outside of nutrition and outside of exercise, sleep is hands down the most important thing you can do for your health. If you are not getting sleep, you're not regulating hormones, you're not producing growth hormones, you're not producing any kind of healing hormones. So you can't out-train and you can't out-eat poor sleep at night. So exercise definitely helps with giving our kids a better sleep. So what can they actually do? My biggest recommendation is to make this a family effort. Make sure that the whole family is on board, not just in the exercise component, but the nutrition component. There's no reason to treat one kid differently than the other. If you can really buy into this as a family, then you will create a team mentality, and the kid will feel something bigger than just themselves. And if you can do these exercises with them, it only takes 10 to 30 minutes a day of just being physical with your kid, helping them dance or stretch or play, or go and play at the park or go swimming. All of these things are incredibly beneficial for every kid in general, but especially those with special needs. They need that extra attention and the extra physical movement. So at Special Strong, we do offer personal training, that's one-on-one. When we also offer group training and boot camps and training with parents and their children, or kids with their siblings as well. Okay. Do you guys have any questions?
Okay, so I'm going to just kind of get a feel for the audience of kind of your ages, and obviously we've got some picky eaters. I have a picky eater myself. So how many have a picky eater that's between birth and 3 years of age? How about 3 and 8 years of age? Okay. How about 8 and plus? Okay. How many are in a current feeding program or followed by a therapist right now? Okay, perfect. That just gives me an idea about who I'm talking to, better tailor my presentation for all the information that you need. A little background about myself is I'm a speech pathologist. I've been a therapist for almost 17 years. Have a lot of experience in the medical setting. I started in the hospitals and then wanted to work with pediatrics, but to do medical pediatrics. And as I got into that, I found a love for feeding and swallowing, and have worked for almost 15 years in the outpatient setting, working with feeding impairments, feeding disorders, and families just trying to get some better help for our kids who have feeding impairments. I am married and I have 3 children, 3 boys, very busy. I have an 11-year-old, a 9-year-old, and a 6-year-old. My 11-year-old and 9-year-old, they're fairly good eaters. I felt like, oh, I've done a great job. I know a lot. I've gone to a ton of trainings, and this is what I do. And however, they eat very vastly different things. That's just their personality. And then my little 6-year-old came along, and he's wheels off and kind of gave a lot of extra spice to our family. And he is definitely a picky eater. He sometimes borders along the side of a problem feeder, and we'll talk a little bit more about that through the presentation. So as a speech pathologist, I love WH questions. That's just what I do. So to try to just break this down, I wanted to go through just some what, who, why, how, and where. We're going to go through tonight just what does a typical eater look like. If you don't have any other siblings or have any other experience, or that's your only child, it's hard to really know what that looks like, and we'll go through that. What is a picky eater versus an extreme picky eater, or what we call a problem feeder? And then a why is why you may have a picky eater. And then tips to consider with meal times and food, and then where do we go if you have someone who's beyond a picky eater. And then I have some resources. There are handouts over here that go through some of the things that we're going to talk about tonight. When we are talking about feeding and swallowing or eating, it's a very emotional subject. Everybody has an opinion. Everybody has a different story. Everybody has a different problem. And so tonight what I wanted to talk about is to give you 4 main things to walk away from, and one is knowledge. I learned a lot over the years about feeding and swallowing and just children in general and development. And sometimes when you have that knowledge and understanding, it just makes a huge difference in how you handle a situation. And even when you have that knowledge, you may not always handle that situation okay, and that's okay. The second one is patience. You need to have patience mostly for yourself, but also for your child. They're going through a lot too, but it's really hard on ourselves. I'm a highly anxious person. I want everything to be perfect, or I have an idea of what I want it to look like, and when something goes awry, I get mad at myself, and then I get impatient with my children. So I find that if I'm not patient with myself and forgiving and have some mercy for myself, then I don't have that for my children as well. So just make sure you know that you need to have patience and to breathe throughout this whole process of their eating and meal times. You're not alone. Obviously, whenever I talk about feeding with children, whether it's moms or coworkers, or they go, oh yes, oh my kid won't eat this, or my kid stopped eating this, or he throws the food, or and so everybody has some form of difficulty with feeding, even typical feeders. But sometimes when you're in that moment and you're having this power struggle with your child, or they're not doing what you need them to do, or you're feeling that worry and anxiety, you do feel alone. And there are a lot of resources out there, and there's becoming more and more support groups for families who have children who are on that picky extreme. And so that's important to know that you're not alone, and you can reach out to some of those people and talk to others about what you're going through. And then the last one, of course, it's not your fault. I think old school, they just say, oh, you have these rules, you just do it this way, and then that's just how and that's how they learn. I had all this experience and knowledge, and I had 2 healthy boys, and they, gave me my challenges and were typical feeders, and then I had this 3rd child who gave me, a run for my money. But it's not my fault. That's how he was born. That's his temperament. That's his personality. That's how he is. And so it didn't matter what I presented him with, that he was giving me himself. And so just to understand that you can take that guilt away and push that away. We all make mistakes, and that it's not your fault. We just have to have some tools to better handle the situation. So I have these little memes here and there because I feel like I always get a kick out of these. Hello, my name is Lexi, and I will gag at the sight of sauce, except if you call it frosting, because I love pasta frosting. So sometimes, these little beings, they have these ideas in their head, and they want to, it's just a specific way. My nephew used to would not eat any hamburger meat unless it was called cowboy food, and then he would eat all of it. So you just, and that sometimes we don't have the patience for that, and you're just like, just eat it. But this shows, this is typical. Like this is who we're dealing with, whether they have a special need or not. So let's go into the what. But actually, before I get started, I just wanted to kind of give a generic, just that I don't expect you, as we go through all of this is going to be a lot of information that I'm trying to cover across the board. Feeding is a very large continuum. So you might have one person who has a mild picky eating, and then you might have someone who is extreme and has a lot of difficulties, and it really affects the family dynamics. It affects every part of your meal. It affects every part of your day. Behaviors can be severe. So this presentation is trying to cover a little bit of all of that. What I really want is, in this presentation, is for you to understand that when you have those power struggles, we need to decrease that and stop that. We need to kind of step back, because that power struggle really affects their relationship with food and doesn't really push them as far forward as we would like to see them move. Nobody's in current therapy, so I was going to just say that if you were receiving therapy, that if this contradicts what your therapist is telling you. This is kind of a generic program and some suggestions. There's a lot of different feeding therapy out there, a lot of different models, and it's always good to work with your therapist and that you feel comfortable with what they're telling you. But these are strategies that can work if a child's receiving outside therapy. That just kind of takes some of that stress off of you at home. So when we talk about a typical eater, we want to talk about what does a typical eater look like. Consider your expectations before I had children, and if you think back before you had children, your expectations of what a child would eat probably vastly changed when you had children. And I know mine did, and I thought, oh, they're supposed to eat this much, and we're supposed to, eat at every meal and every snack, and they've got to have all this food. And that quickly changed my perspective after doing a lot of research, and then I realized I actually know very little about how much children will eat. One thing we do know that they are consistently inconsistent. So even just average children who are preschool age, they are inconsistent. You're going to have a typically developing child who has a great diet who's going to just drop a food and say, oh, I love pancakes, and then the next day go, I don't eat pancakes. So that's normal that they're going to change on you like that. And while it's frustrating, we have to understand that they are going to be like this. They're also going to range from vast range of what's normal for a child. So one child might eat a really big breakfast, and one child may not eat dinner. Another child may eat nothing for breakfast and eat 2 or 3 snacks and call it a day. So it is normal, and they'll grow. The main thing that we're looking for is the growth chart. We have to have some caution when we're looking at growth charts because they can cause a little anxiety. Even with all of my experience, when my son was in the 3rd percentile on the growth chart, that made me really worry and create a lot of anxiety within myself, because as a mom, the main thing you want to do, or as a dad, you want to feed your child. And that is something that we are born to do, and that is our job because they can't do it. And when they come to us and they don't want to eat, or they can't eat, or they don't enjoy eating, then we feel like it's our fault, or we feel like we've done something. So the growth chart we want to consider is that you want to always see just some type of slow and steady progress. So whether they're in the 3rd percentile or the 50th percentile, you just always want to look to make sure that they're continuing in that same percentile. If we see a jagged drop, that they're not eating anymore, or their weight is significantly dropping, then that's when we need to consider some other methods. But if they're having this continued growth, my son has gone from 3rd percentile to 10th to 20th to back to 15th, and I think he's at 10 again. So he's kind of gone through those percentiles, but he's had a steady growth. And so I need to understand that that's okay, and I'm going to take that anxiety off of myself to say he is still growing, he is still healthy, he's not fallen off the charts or had a significant jag in his diet. We also see in typical eaters that they are going to gag and they're going to refuse food. When you are feeding, even my healthy eaters, my one son, he hated zucchini. I didn't know. I tried to give him zucchini and he gagged and he vomited all over the table. He's a typical eater. He's normal, but he had a reaction. When they're learning to eat and they're trying to learn the mechanism of chewing and swallowing, they're gagging. That's normal. A gag reflex is a good thing. What we see in children with special needs is that sensory piece and the motor piece, and we do see gagging. We think, oh my goodness, but it does happen in typically developing children. And then we also want to consider their temperament. So whether you have some kids are just easygoing and they'll just take whatever, and some kids are very independent, and I have to have this, and I want to open this way, and I want to cut this way. That's normal. We have to consider when it gets to such an extreme, does it cross over into abnormal? So to give you a little bit of understanding, and everybody has, in the feeding world, everybody has a little bit of different understanding about what is a picky eater, what is a problem feeder. This is by Dr. Kay Toomey, and she wrote a book about SOS feeding, and it just talks about sensory and feeding and how to help your child eat. But she kind of broke it down into a nice little chart that I wanted to share with you about what do we consider a picky eater, and then what do we consider a problem feeder. Now, we as speech pathologists, we like to use a lot of different vocabulary. So problem feeder, another term is a child with feeding disorder, a child with a feeding impairment, or an extreme picky eater. So you can kind of see all those terms, and probably a few more interchanged with that. So when we're looking at a picky eater, we're looking at that they do have a decreased range. They're going to eat probably at least 30 different foods. Now when you think about, oh, my child only eats so many foods, you'd actually be surprised if you wrote down all the different types of foods, not food groups, not, chips, but different types of chips or different types of fruit or different types of bread. Those are types of food. So understanding that, do they eat 30 different types of food? Do they have food where they lose it because they burn out, but eventually they can regain it? So there are times that I know all of my children have said, "No, I don't like apples anymore." Great, I just bought a huge bag from Costco, and you have loved apples for 3 years, and now we don't. Nobody likes apples in this house, and that is just something that they will regain it. Eventually, that's going to come back around. It may not be this year. It may be next year. It may be next week. I don't know, but they will regain it. Tolerates new foods on the plate. So not necessarily that you're making them eat the new food, but that if you put something new, that they wouldn't have a complete meltdown over it. They might say something about it. They might tell you a few choice words, but they're gonna be somewhat okay with it. Eating one food from most food group, texture, and nutrition groups. So when I'm talking about food groups, I'm talking about proteins, I'm talking about fruits and vegetables. I combine that group of fruits and vegetables combined for me, because when we deal with children with feeding and picky eating and feeding impairments, they may eat fruits, but they may not eat vegetables. And we have to also consider the nutrients of a fruit and a vegetable. And I'll take if they can eat some fruits, and then we'll work on the vegetables. But breads, crunchy foods, chips, sugar, do they eat something from each of those main food groups? And then they frequently eat different set of foods at the meal, but they're going to eat with the family. So you usually have to fix them something separate because they don't like what you're fixing, of course. But they are okay to sit with you at the table. They're okay to sit next to you if you have a plate of food that is different from theirs. And then a picky eater will sometimes be reported as parents as a picky eater while checkup. So it comes up, yeah, he's really picky. How's he eating? He's picky. But it's not like this overwhelming concern that consumes your day. For a problem feeder or an extreme picky eater, we want to see that they have less than 20 different foods. So they're very restricted in that. And sometimes we might see that it actually starts to decline as they age. Foods are not always, foods that are lost or not acquired after a break or result in decreased foods in their repertoire. So if they say, I'm not going to eat apples, then the next thing you know, they're not eating bananas, and they're not eating oranges, and then all of a sudden they're not eating fruits at all, and they're starting to hone in on just a select few foods that they feel safe with and comfortable with. They cry or fall apart when new foods are presented. That will happen sometimes with typically developing children, but if this is a constant thing with multiple meals, anytime something is put on the plate and they have a complete meltdown, then that's important to know where your child is on that continuum. Refuses entire categories of food, so they may not eat any fruits and vegetables, they may not eat any meats, they may not eat any certain types of food, like texture food. I don't want any purees, or I want anything that is crunchy. Also, that they would always eat different foods. They never eat what you're eating or try anything that you're eating, and they don't eat with the family. This might also include that they won't eat at birthday parties, or they won't go to someone's house and have a meal because they're just not capable to eat anything in that area. And then they're persistently reported at parent checkups as a picky eater. So this kind of gives you an idea that maybe you can think about your child and where they fall. And this also will kind of let you decide, if you start to see your child go from picky eater into extreme picky eating, then when does that turn into that we might need some additional help for that. So the next thing that I'd like to go through is of course, another meme. I love it. Hello, my name is Margaret, and I think cheese and tortillas are delicious, but if you melt them together and call it a quesadilla, I won't touch it. My son threw that face. So here's our background of our knowledge. So I feel like I'm going to give you a little bit of knowledge so that you can kind of understand what might be causing some picky eating, because we know it's not our fault. But could I put spinach on a sandwich or something, spinach and something else? He would flip out. He would know that I messed it up. So be careful with that. But again, always have something they'll eat. And my rule, and I find that this is important, I'm not going to force you to eat food that you don't want to eat, but I am going to tell you have to put it on your plate. So I choose what goes on your plate and you choose what you eat. So at the dinner, if there's only one thing he's going to eat, because I'm always going to serve something he's going to eat, then he can choose to eat that, but he is exposed to all these foods on his plate. I have been really amazed at how he'll touch the other foods, or he'll put it to his mouth, or he'll talk about it, and it just gets that exposure for him. But that's the rule in our house. So when we're thinking about what foods, your child usually has like these very specific things that they like and what they like to have. We do have to consider, when we're trying to get them to try new foods, that we want to consider the bite size. We want to make sure that they have smaller bite sizes. My husband, I always get on to him because he loves steak, and he'll cut up steak and he'll put a big piece like this on my kids' plates. I'm like, you can't eat steak like that. I can eat a piece like that, but he can't eat that. So I have to cut it into fine-tuned little bites, and that's going to be more success. If you have a picky eater that takes a bite of something that's too big and too difficult to chew, what's the likelihood that they're going to try that again? They're not. So the smaller the better. And you want to consider that if they're young, can they eat hard vegetables? Can they eat those hard nuts? You have to try to find ways that works for around their age and their skill. You want to consider your textures. So we have purees, lumpy purees, ground and solid textures, coarse chopped solids, and dual multiple difficult textures. I know a lot about this because this is how we work in therapy and feeding, that we work through different types of textures. But for your sensory heavy kids, they're going to definitely have certain preferences. One thing that you've got your lumpy purees with like your yogurts with things in it, soup, things like that have stuff in it. But then like they love the ground soft solid textures, the pancakes, the nuggets, the ground meat, things that are easy to chew, that are more processed, but they don't like more the coarsely chopped solids. Or you may have a child who loves coarsely chopped solids, real crunchy things, but won't touch a puree to save his life. So you kind of have to look and understand what your child likes. Are they eating all the textures, or are they only eating a few? What's really interesting and good to just be aware of are dual and multiple textures. So these are the hardest for kids. An apple with the peeling, the grape with the peeling. If I have to peel another grape, I am going to lose my mind. But it's because it is a dual texture. It has a multiple texture to it, and they can't handle that. Soup, I love soups. They're so easy to cook. My kid can't stand it because it's got liquid and a solid all combined, and he has to try to manage that in his mouth, and it's too much. So just consider that. Sandwiches, everybody loves sandwiches. Not these kids. They'll pick it apart and separate it. So just understand, okay, this is a difficult texture. That's why he's not eating it. I need to try something else. You want to consider the way it's served. You want to consider the shape, consider dips, and then we'll talk about chaining. So when we look at how a food looks, you want to try, so say my son doesn't like apples because I sliced it like a regular apple slicer. Well, the next time I'm going to expose him to it, I'm going to do it in a stick. You know what? He loves veggie sticks, so I'm going to cut it into sticks. And then, I may dice it, or I may slice it in half and get half an apple. So now I've offered it to him multiple ways. You'd be amazed at how much a child will eat something if it has changed its shape. And sometimes we'll go into chaining a little bit about how if they like something about one type of food and you create it in another food, they're more willing to be open to it. My son did not like apples. I tried the sticks. He didn't like the sticks. He didn't like it whole. He didn't like it sliced. But when I put it in fine diced pieces, he was willing to poke it and eat it. Didn't say he loved it, but he was willing to try it. Oh my gosh, I got him to eat an apple. And then we want to consider the dips. Some kids love dips. I've even seen on Amazon, like they have these little bowls that can clip to your tray. I am all for dips. If they will dip it and eat it, let them. I don't care if it's the most disgusting thing. I think my son dipped, he must have done something like an apple in ketchup or something, and he thought it was amazing. And I thought, that is the most disgusting thing. I'd be embarrassed if you did that in front of people, but I don't care. You just ate that apple. And maybe I can get you to use ketchup on something else that'll get you to expand your food. So I am all about dips. Consider changing the type. If they like ranch, consider changing the ranch flavor to another ranch flavor. Maybe you can go to Caesar. Looks the same, tastes kind of the same, but it changes just a little bit. And those are good ways to get them to try new foods. So the next part is chaining. And this is a technique that a lot of therapists use. It's a technique that you can, I'm going to kind of give you just the basics of it, but you can learn more about it. I have some resources about a book about chaining. And chaining really just takes the foods that a child loves. And that's why I went through all that mess about what type of food, what does it look like, what's the texture, because that's so important to them. So when you consider all their favorite foods and you look at all the characteristics, the color, the taste, the temperature, the texture, then you go, okay, they like this, they all have these similar characteristics. How can I chain a new food that is like these? So you may consider like chaining that, like the apple. So my son finally ate an apple and did well with it. And so I said, what is like an apple that isn't too far off? You know, an orange, definitely no. A grape, definitely no. But a pear is really close to an apple. So I presented a pear. I didn't fool him and say it's apple, but I said, you know, this is a pear, and I cut it just like he liked it. And he was willing to try it. Still wasn't his favorite, but he tried it. That's a success. So you want to consider the characteristic of that food, and then when you want to use the characteristic to make choices about new foods. And like I mentioned, there is a book about chaining, and it's really great. So that might help you because everybody has different, what we call bridges, like you can bridge from one food to another. So that's really based on your individual needs. And then you want to talk positively about the foods. Like I said, we're at the table, we're talking positively, we're all engaging. You know, they hear you talk about it versus, okay, here's my child eating his own food at a different table, or he's not hungry. He just doesn't get that exposure about that vocabulary. He doesn't get the exposure about the look, the smell, and that we talk about it. Here's a thing that I do. We explore it, but we don't eat. And this also depends on where your child is on the continuum, because sometimes if you try to pressure them to do something and they have an extreme negative reaction, then you want to make sure that, okay, that was a little too far. But some kids are okay with it. Some kids are okay with a little, like, if I don't make you eat it, I'm okay with whatever you want me to do with it. So some things we've done, we kiss it. Sometimes we'll kiss it goodbye. Like, you know, they have their food on their plate that they didn't ask for, but they have to have. And I'll say, okay, it's time to put it in the sink. You got to kiss it goodbye. Kiss it. What does that do? Gets it to their lips. Now they can, oh, I tasted that orange. I don't know about that, but I didn't have to eat it. That's all that matters. So sometimes kissing it is good. Sometimes licking it. Oh, you look interested in that? You want to just lick it? You don't have to eat it. Don't swallow it. Certainly don't bite it, but you can lick it. And what does that do? Now you've got it on their tongue. So now they've tasted it. They smell it because it's close to their mouth, but they don't have to eat it. They don't have that pressure. And then sometimes they may feel like, oh, I'm going to bite it. And then they go, whoa, I don't like it. I always give permission to spit it out. Always. You've at least, just to get it in some of their mouths and to get it on their teeth and to chew or to feel is a huge component. And I'm okay if you want to spit it out. We'll get to that another time that you can maybe swallow it. And I think they feel like I don't always have to eat it, and that's okay. And you start to see that in my meal, even though it takes a while to get there, that they allow lots of different foods, and that they may be willing to explore them. It may take them a year, but they get there. And then you want to, like I said, we do mouse bites too. Sometimes I'll say, you know, you can just try a tiny bit, just a little nibble. Tell me what you think. And sometimes we'll do. My kids are getting a little bit older. We'll go, what do you think? Give me a thumbs up about that. And I'm okay with that. Another thing to be a tool that you can try if your child is okay with it is we do no thank you bites. So as my child got a little bit older and started, you know, being a little bit more comfortable with food, and we were having stressful, you know, situations at the table, sometimes he would, you know, he's like, I'm done. I'm like, well, I need you to take a no thank you bite of that. I need you to try it to tell me if you like it, give me a thumbs up or not. And if not, you know, I need you to say no thank you. So, but for him to say no thank you, he has to try it. So that worked a little bit in our house. Sometimes I fight that battle, sometimes I don't fight that battle because it might be, depending on what the food is, it might be too difficult. But it's been amazing how many no thank you bites have turned into, oh yeah, I can eat that. or he'll go, oh, I tasted that, okay, that's okay. And then it'll turn to, oh, I'll take a few more bites. He's not gonna clean his plate, but he's moved to a new food. And the last thing for that is exposure, exposure, exposure. I feel like if there's one thing that I've been trying to explain is the more exposure a child has to the food, whether it's visual, sensory, with smell, touch, taste, the more that they're going to be willing to eat it. A typical child may not like a food. You offer it 3 or 4 times and they'll be like, yeah, okay, I'll finally try it. Our children who have special needs or who are extreme picky eaters, at least a dozen times they have to see that food and be exposed to that food before they're willing to even consider touching it or trying it. So we just don't want to give up. Don't get frustrated if you've been, serving something for months and they are still not taking to it. It's okay. One of the things I wanted to consider when I was trying to get my son to eat a more variety of food is I was trying to think of what food can I get him to eat that would work well with my family and with multiple meals. And for me, that was brown rice. And so we spent some time doing brown rice. He wouldn't touch it. He hated rice. It wasn't what he wanted. And lo and behold, guess what he eats all the time now? Brown rice. It took over a year, but now I can serve chicken and rice. We can serve all kinds of things. We make a big thing of brown rice at the beginning of the week, and I know every time I put brown rice on his plate, he's going to eat that. He may not eat the meat with it, but he's going to eat the rice. And I can even put some oil or butter on it. I can do that to him now, and he's fine with it. And it gets him a little bit more healthier fats. So those are some tips and techniques on just some ideas to expand, but the main thing is to take that power struggle out of your meal and to make it safe for him he or she to sit down and to expose themselves to those meals and those different foods. So where do I go if my child is beyond a picky eater? If they're beyond a picky eater, meaning that K2Me's list, or they're dropping off the growth, they're significantly changing in their weight, you want to consider seeking an evaluation. An evaluation might involve a speech pathologist, it might involve OT. It's usually one of us. Sometimes we work together. It could also involve another team of a psychologist, a dietitian, a GI, a doctor, because there's sometimes gut issues there. But just understand that not all are created equal. So just because you have a speech pathologist doesn't mean they have any experience with feeding or swallowing, or that they're trained in that. So you have to seek out what you're looking for. And you have to understand that when you do sign up for feeding therapy, that there are different types of therapy out there, different philosophies, different theories. So sometimes we have a counseling kind of therapy that works for some families. There is a behavioral type of therapy that's more of an ABA style of therapy that works for some kids. And then they have sensory motor play. That's another one where they're playing and they're being fun with, and they're desensitizing to that food in a playful way. It might include kisses and licks and bites and spits and different levels that they're working with the therapist. I've been through all of these. I've used a little bit of all of these. I like to tailor the therapy to the child and what works best for the child. A very strict ABA style doesn't work for one, but might work for another. So you just have to consider what's right for your family and your child. And ask those questions before you get started in therapy. So do research, find what's right for your family, and then places to start. UTD Calgary Center, that they have a feeding program, a STEPS program that kind of follows along with a lot of the things I talked about today. They have a lot of different little programs that you can go to. Any of the major hospitals, Children's Health, Cook's Children, they also have feeding programs for pediatrics, and some of them have inpatient feeding programs depending on how severe the need is. And then I've seen a lot more private practices pop up where they're having feeding therapists who are a little bit more trained in feeding. One of the books that I gathered a lot of this information from was Helping Your Child with Extreme Picky Eating. This is from Dr. Rowell and Jenny McLaughlin. Jenny McLaughlin is a speech therapist I work for in the hospitals, and she's now at Calgary Center. So they wrote this book, and that's kind of where a lot of this no pressure comes from, but does help expand their food and their diet and helps you as a family. Out of Sync Child, Raising a Happy, Healthy Eater, and then Food Chaining, there's Sherry Franker.
And we have multiple copies of the Out of Sync Child in the lending library if you want to grab one on your way
It's a very popular book that goes, yes, definitely into that sensory. Website, this is a great website. It actually has a lot of good, like Pinterest, little things of how tips to help. And that is yourkidstable.com. And that's on that handout as well. So, all right, and that's the end.
Thank you so much,
Yeah,
ladies.
you're welcome.
Okay, everybody get home safe. Keep in mind we have a parent training here tomorrow morning at 8:30, self-help chores and responsibilities. If you're interested in getting some tips and techniques for helping your kids get more involved in things at home and learning how to learn skills at all ages and all abilities. That's tomorrow morning here. And then February 15th, we will have our next group parent training on ADHD. And we have 2 adults coming to talk. Trinity's husband is one of them from Special Strong. And they're going to be talking about ADHD and what has helped them with their struggles with ADHD through their lives. So. Please don't hesitate to contact us if you have questions or need support, and check out the lending library on your way out, and we hope to see you again at a future training. You guys have a good evening.